Hello, I'm Bethany. I'm a lower elementary teacher of Montessori, so I teach grades 1, 2, and 3, and today I'm going to be telling you about how I teach writing and how the students practice writing, because I got a question from another teacher who had bought my scope and sequence, and they asked, like, how do you teach first graders, like, how to write a story, because I see on your map it says, like, teach this part of story writing and then that part and then the next part and everything. So I'll show you how I like to go through it. So I made this little brainstorm writing, I guess you could call it a little packet thing for the kids to be able to do to write their story. So this is their story, the first page, my story. It's title, author, genre. Now right now the first thing they might be able to do is just, like, obviously write their name. They probably don't know what genre to pick yet, and they probably don't know the title yet because they haven't written it yet. But this is just the front page. Usually I'll like 3-hole punch it and put it in a little folder so they have it all together. But the first thing we do is we brainstorm different characters, and I do this first instead of like the plot because the characters kind of drive what they want to do. And sometimes they try to pick like characters that are already invented. I said, nope, we have to make our own characters. So the name, the age, what they look like, so using adjectives is what I like to do here. And this is for the main character. So that's one person, but then, and again, this is all just brainstorming things, so if they change it later for their final draft, it's okay, but the kids are pretty creative, so they like to do it. So for the next characters, how many characters will your story have and who are the supporting characters? So we could say maybe that's a child and maybe their two supporting characters are mom and dad, or maybe it's like a child and then two friends. I try, if they say it's going to have 9 characters, I'm like, I don't think you're going to write. I don't say that to them, but I was like, okay, well, let's list out who you want and have them have a purpose in the story, because there could be background characters, like if it's in a classroom, but they all don't have to have names or stories. So just focus on who will have like a big role in the story. And just to have them start thinking about that, I have you can make multiple copies of this page if needed. The supporting characters, what their name, age, and what they look like. So it's I made them smaller and 2 to a page because I wanted to differentiate between like the main character and a different character. Like the supporting ones that aren't, to show that they're not the main character. But if they have more than 2, obviously you can print this page multiple times. So then once you have your characters, it's easier for them to come up with a plot. And some kids do get confused at this point. Like, oh, why do I have to have 2 plot ideas? Well, that's just for you to brainstorm. Again, the brainstorm is a thing. And sometimes, I don't know where it is, maybe we'll come across it. Sometimes I have a picture of like a brain up here and then lines before like the character wants to like think of ideas. But I found that one kind of throws them off. Like, well, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand. That's why I like to start with the characters first and then the plot ideas. So I explain obviously what a plot is, and before this I'll like explain the parts of a story, so when they go through it, or I'll just do it one at a time, especially for the first years, but one at a time. So who are your characters, and then what are your characters going to be doing? What are your characters going to be doing? And I explain it like, what's the problem? Because every story needs a problem to solve, whether they want there to be a problem, true problem, or it doesn't have to be a true problem. It could be like, oh, how to bake a cake, and then what's missing? We don't have a muffin tin. How did they solve the problem? Or, that type of thing. So I try to have them do 2. Sometimes they're just like stuck on the one plot, and that's fine because they're young and they're just learning how to write and everything. Or sometimes with the second and third years, I'll say, we'll do 2 different, like, this is a really good one to do around like October too with the older ones, because then they have like, sometimes, I don't know, I guess most of the kids I've had like to do spooky ideas, but obviously not everybody's going to do that. So if someone picks a spooky idea, well, I'm like, pick another plot that's like the exact opposite of that. And then once they have their plot, then we move more into conflict. So just highlighting what is that main idea or the conflict of your story. What is your story trying to solve? And then which plot did you pick and why? So obviously you can omit this page if they just pick the one plot, but it's better for them to think, okay, why did I pick this plot? Just a deeper way to understand, like, the characters are going to move through their journey, and they're going to pick, they're going to do this because, or it could just be like, I like muffins and I wanted to make a story about muffins, that type of thing. And then obviously we need a resolution to the story. So how will the conflict be solved? How will it be solved? It could be anything. They found the recipe for the muffins and then they made that, or maybe the two friends were in a fight and then they talked through it and that was how it was solved. Maybe something was missing. It's good to have a plot, especially when kids write stories where it's like there is like a mystery to it, or solving an actual problem that they could understand, like, my friend stole my toy and it was missing. How? And then the supporting character helped me look under the table, wasn't there. In the microwave, wasn't there. Maybe it's in someone's backpack, but we can't accuse people, like, so just going through, having like a problem that's typically in their life also helps when writing a story. And also, most of these are done separate days, and that's why I have them separated on my scope and sequence map. So it's not like they're doing this all at once. One day we're just going to focus on the characters. If we come back to it that same week, that's great, but maybe it's the next week they want to do it. And then the setting. And you might think, well, the setting is probably more important than the characters and the plot. It's like, well, now that we have, if you pick, I guess it could kind of go in any order, but I found that it's better to have the setting after the characters and the plot, because then it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen in the story. Where is it going to take place? Because like the muffin thing could technically happen either at grandma's house, at your house, at school. Maybe you went to a cooking class. Where is it going to be taking place? And then again, adjectives to how to describe the setting. So this part, you might just want to stop there for like first graders. But then this part, these new other pages go through a lot more of like in depth. So the plot, how will you set up the plot / conflict? What is the rising action? So that's the little chart that goes rising, or like the introduction part, which I know has a different name. The rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion, or resolution. I forget what this first part's called at the moment, but if you look it up, it looks like this, the writing thing. So this is kind of for second and third graders almost, but it could still be done with some first years, as we know. So the rising action, how will the story start? So this is just saying, you could also explain it to first graders as like, okay, this is the opening scene. What's going to happen? Because what I found is a lot of kids the kids wanted to make muffins. They got all the ingredients and made the muffins. They enjoyed the muffins. Okay, stories are not 3 sentences long. They're just not. I tell the kids, it's uninteresting. That's not a story. And maybe that sounds a little harsh, but it's not a story. And you just don't want to, here's a side tangent, you just don't want to say, they made the muffins. No, like, get exaggerated. Man, I'm so hungry after school and I don't want goldfish for the 1000th time. What can I do? Oh, I know. I can make a new snack. Or if it's an I guess, but if it's in like the name of the character, let's just say Bob. And here's the other thing, kids love to listen. So Bob opened the fridge. Bob took out the eggs. Bob gathered the ingredients. Or even just saying things in a way where the kids can not necessarily say what's going on. Like, they pulled in the chair, they sat down, instead saying they slumped in their seat. That's a more interesting way. So that's kind of an advanced writing tip, but it's just a way to get kids not to write the same thing over and over. So anyways, what's the beginning of your story? And then, so this is the climax, the most exciting part of the story, what happens in the story. And my muffin example, like, is kind of loose with the climax. But if there's something missing, maybe they finally found the thing, right? Or that would really be the resolution. But maybe the most exciting part is they have 2 suspects or something. Things like that. And then obviously how the story ends. Usually the problem gets solved. And then this is the same thing again. I must have had 2 copies. So that's just basically how I like to do the writing and how to talk about the writing and things. I know also my maps for my writing stories, it mentions like the 6 traits, and that's just for like the brainstorming ideas and everything. Because when I took like the AMS writing course, separate from like my training, they talked a lot about the 6 traits, and I found that kind of harder for lower elementary. It was made for the elementary years, but it still is. And I notice on my maps also that I do have ideas first, which is okay because I do like to introduce the idea of ideas first and the plot and then go over the characters. But when I use that, it's my thing. I'm like, let's think of the characters first, because I found that brainstorming. So I know, like, also my maps are editable, obviously, because not all of us have the same exact works when you get them. But so I'm saying that because like maybe you want to put the character part first, but when I do talk about stories, I say, well, every story has a plot, and that's why I put that first on the one that I use and everything. But yeah, it's broken up into little chunks. If you want those specific writing papers, they are in my paid for hub. Maybe I'll make a separate thing where you could just buy the stories, that story paper, and now I have to pay for like the whole paid for hub. But I have a lot of free resources in my free resource hub, and also my scope and sequence and maps I'll list below. Thank you for watching, and I hope that helped you with having your kids go through the writing journey, because I find when they try to do one big writing project all at once, it's just a mess, and then they get tired and they don't want to do it. But I'm like, okay, the first day is the characters, and then they could think about it. And then sometimes they come back and say like, hey, I have a better idea for my plot. And then it could be changed because we're not just trying to rush through it in one day. Thank you for watching.